years. And that was the first field that I talked to an outside organization, a company that fixes fields to fix. And he walked over and he looked at it. He was like, "There's no fixing this field. We need to rebuild it." But because it's been a backup field, we haven't spent our money there. This year we spent $45,000 fixing fields. We didn't spend money fixing that. We have at one point we put about $6,000 into it to make it playable and safe. But it just needs to be redone. I mean, you can literally, there's about if you were on third baseline, well, so for those of you that watch baseball, if you look at Fenway Park, and this is just an example, like you can see it there, the field is basically flat, except for that. You look at fields that need to be redone, they slope significantly, especially off the baselines. And if you stand on the third baseline of this field and you walk about 8 feet out, you drop down and probably a foot because there's so much excess and movement of material, and there's no undoing it. Surprisingly, there is actually in one of the sheds, there is a Rainbird controller, which is an irrigation controller. I've not seen that irrigation on for 25 years, but it's supposed to be on that field. So you dig down enough, and we might find an irrigation system. Maybe not. Maybe we don't know where it is. But that's how long it's been there. But we don't use that field as enough. So we don't put money into it. We haven't put money into it because we don't need that size field. But we really need a 50, 60 foot base path, lily field, and a 70-foot base path. Field. So that's the larger investment.
And that's $98,000.
Yes, that does. There is a buffer there.
Okay. There's some sort of contingency built into that. Is that what you mean?
Yes, okay. That's how contingency. And with that amount, I'm also looking to put new netting between the softball field and the baseball field. Higher.
So for orientation, the softball field is the one that's basically the first field you walk onto as you're walking towards all the fields, right? Along that
T-ball field. So it's fair.
And then the Babe Ruth field the Babe Ruth field is, I think we're talking about the same thing. We're just talking about it. I'm coming in a different direction.
Yeah.
The baseball field is that one that's kind of plopped in the middle of all the other fields.
That's right. The big field right in the middle.
And you'd run a net of some sort. Because my son played Babe Ruth, and sitting on the benches there, you'd hear a crack, a really hot, solid crack from the softball field, and you'd go like this because you're afraid to get hit in the head.
That's actually another reason we haven't used that field very much, because as a full-size baseball field, because the balls are hit that far and that high, you can't be using any other field around it, which is just that much harder, especially for field 2. So the field we're talking about is 5. And
I forgot about the T-ball field. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was one of the fields we did last year.
Okay.
So field 2 is the softball field, and that is the field that when that field 5 is a Babe Ruth field, there are a lot of balls that go over it and hit into field 2, and it's not safe.
But foul balls. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So with the smaller field, there are going to be less balls going over, but there still needs to be netting between those two fields. So another big advantage of this is because the infield will be coming in. And so if you can picture this, if anyone knows what the field is, where the pitcher's mound is right now, that will actually be second base. That's how much it comes in. It's much smaller. So that makes field A that much larger. And that's where one of our fields for flag.
Okay.
We utilize every.
So when you said it, I thought you said it was going to be a flex field.
It is.
So what makes it a flex field if the base paths are only the short distance?
They're not. You have a 60-foot and 70-foot. You cover them up. You're taking
But the Babe Ruth field is 90, you said.
Yes.
It's a full size.
And that will go away.
Okay.
You can't have a flex
So
field with a 90.
Who uses 60 versus 70?
The littlest kids are Little League, which is 60,
Okay.
and then you get up to the 11 and 12-year-olds.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's where I was confused because I thought you were going a 43-foot mound and a 60-foot mound. Never mind. Okay. Those are the pictures, the first two pictures.
The first two pictures of the condition of the field right now. The second picture I tried to take to show you that it's very hard to take a picture that shows angles, or at least it is for me.
Yeah.
But that's, you should be looking at a flat surface other than the mound, and it's definitely far from a flat surface. And I will say the top picture shows the condition now, because what that is showing is the infield mix is very silty and it's a lot of material thrown in. But honestly, the issue with this field is not the condition it is now. It's we don't need this field, we need up 200.
Okay. And the Babe Ruth folks are comfortable with losing the backup field, or?
Yeah, it's a baseball.
Okay.
All
right.
And they're they work with both Rentham and Plainville to use their Babe Ruth fields.
Anyone have any questions? Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any questions on the need to change over the utility and all that is fine. I certainly don't have any questions on the condition of the field. I do have a question on maintenance, right? So I'm inferring some things from what you said. I'm not saying you said this directly, but I'm inferring that in the past, there was never enough money to go around to maintain all of the fields that we had in town. So you prioritized and you deprioritized the field that we use the least. Hence why it looks like it does now, right? If this field had been maintained over time and, actively leveled each year, those sorts of things, it probably would have degraded quite this much. But I guess once we pay the money to redo the field, this is no longer going to be deprioritized. I'm wondering what the addition of a new field does from a maintenance and operating budget.
So those are all very good questions. So I will say this, over time, we have maintained to the level it was like when I started 25 years ago, which was not great to begin with. Baseball fields are not easy to maintain. It's, people think, oh, you just rake it. You don't just rake it. You can actually destroy it. I happened this summer. Some really constant field doing correctly, and we offer the dip, and that costs about $5,000. So you can do a lot of field. We do maintain fields through DPW, but I will say this: we lost another grounds person, and there are going to be issues with that because right now they can't maintain the baseball fields. So what we have always relied on is them taking care of them for 1 week. The routine maintenance prevents the big jobs, so they don't have time for the baseball field.
Right. Well, which kind of is where I'm going, which is it wise to spend $100,000 to rebuild a field if we don't have the capacity to properly?
So we won't be able to maintain it as we do the other fields. So we have a tractor that the baseball and softball people use as well. And I'm hoping that we get that grounds person back so we can at least use the machine that this town owns that specifically made for infields once a week. So this past spring, one of the things to help and maintain our baseball fields is I hired a co-op student from Norfolk. So the baseball fields at Freeman Kennedy will rake every day. And it made a difference. So we plan to continue with that. This is the first year we have done it. So we do plan on continuing it. If in an ideal world, we would have a parks and recreation crew that maintain the field all the fields every day. Very few places have that. So we have to combine our efforts. Baseball does some of it. I hired a co-op student. DPW will groom fields. The grounds foreman, I think, has a degree, in college degree, can certainly groom fields very well, as long as there's staff to do the other work as well. So hopefully we'll get that ground person back and we'll be able to do that. I would say this, if we don't, we would prioritize rooming the infields and maybe ask them not to line the fields and have someone else line the field because that doesn't take as much expertise. So we've had to juggle things this year. I'm not trained, I can't tell you, but we don't need the field that's there. And
Ann, do you mind if I chime in?
it's the upside is how the field's smaller.
Right. Before, any other questions? Chris Curry from the Baseball Association is on. Chris, did you have a question? I saw your name light up.
No, can you guys hear me?
Or a comment?
Can you guys hear me?
If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Send it. There we go. No, we can't. If you want to type your message, if it's a comment, you can certainly type it and we can read it.
I have a question while we're waiting for that.
Sure.
So I haven't had time to go through 243 pages of Freeman Kennedy, but we're all on the same topic and on the same property in the same place. Is there a chance that if the other project gets approved, that field improvements could be part of the overall cost of?
I wouldn't be supporting adding money to that for this. It's sort of a different part of the budget. If you know what I'm saying. In other words, I don't think they anticipated it. I think when the school was built, there was some contingency because you were actually removing some fields and replacing them elsewhere. So they actually got rid of fields when they built the new school. And the tennis courts or something, whatever it was there. Yeah. So
Would it be more cost effective though, that if the school project passes and there's people already there doing the site work, could it be done cheaper with the people already there than?
So building fields is a very specialized project, specialized item. You would not want to have a construction crew come in and as much as they would tell you to build a field, it would be questionable.
No, I don't think because it's just that. It's a matter of, do we put $100 grand more into a school project that's already X instead of doing it out of CPC? That's what it's.
Yeah, it's.
So,
and I would respond that CPC is a more easily accessible source of funds. And sooner as well. I mean, if we do an override, it's a couple of years out.
Not very important.
So
I think that, I feel like the CPC funds are there for this type of item, and I think it may complicate the school project to put a sports field in. I mean, I think we may group of people.
we can talk about that as that's sort of part of what we can talk about when we talk about the article itself. But I don't think.
If you were to add any sports field, any sport thing to the school, I would add down by the trailers. It's already.
It's gaining traction with the pre-K crowd, right? Pickleball.
You're probably better at it than everyone. That's the better one.
Can you charge? Can you charge for that?
Charge to what?
To rent a pickleball field?
Yeah, you can.
I mean, there's like a long list of people who do pickleball.
I think Millis charges for it.
Eric, is that going to work?
It should work.
Chris, you want to make your statement? We saw part of your message. I think you're working now. If you could come off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I was just going to add to what Ann said. Like, I've been involved with Norfolk baseball for about 7 years now, not in the capacity I'm in now. But I think the work that Ann and I have done over the last couple of years to really focus on not just making sure that we're getting the fields ready for the season, but trying to keep them in great shape going forward. So we can spend more of our focus on the fields that really need the work. All of the fields, with the exception of the one in question here and the softball field that we want to do some work on as well, are all in the best shape that I've seen them in the 7 years I've been volunteering. So it's part what Ann said about hiring the Aggie student We've made it a strong focus in our program to really train our coaches on field maintenance much more so than it has been done in the past. So I think we're on a path toward making sure the fields remain in good shape and not just season to season having to do big re-engineering jobs.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on this one? Why don't we do Article 11, the softball field? We're moving on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next field.
Yep.
Okay, so the next field is it is a smaller project, and it is a drainage project, basically. To fix the drainage, we need to cut back 8 feet of the sod around and regrade and either amend or replace the infield mixes there. We don't have the equipment, we don't have manpower to do this kind of work. The last softball tournament we had in August, it rained, surprisingly, right? But of the 29 softball fields that were being used for that one tournament, this field is the only field that was unplayable. So we need to dig it up, and we need to grade it appropriately. And with that, while we were doing that, we were also going to add 3 spray heads for dust, which is a huge help, but it doesn't rain every single weekend. Like last. So we are going to, while we're doing this, we're going to take the time to make additional changes as well.
This project's $33,000, if I remember correctly. If the spray heads, the contingency, and includes the spray head.
Yep.
Okay.
It does.
There is an irrigation head over there somewhere, if I remember. There's a place to plug a hose in.
There is that. There is, okay.
Okay. All right.
Actually, I don't actually know.
It's underground, or it's not ground level, if I remember correctly. It's a long time. I think there is, but that was a long time ago for me. So, do you remember the last time you redid this field? Because you did come before town meeting.
Yeah, it was definitely built. We put up the netting and we changed it with it in the field that wasn't, again, it was one of the fields that was in a corner that wasn't used, and we stripped it and made it so it was playable by both softball and baseball, because softball needed more fields, but baseball also needed it. And we did that at the time. The location of the field, it has a hill going straight down to third base, so there's some drainage issues that we need to fix. And
I have the wrong field in mind. This is not the field I think it is. It's not the one that's behind the. Can you pull the map back up there?
It's the one, if you were standing at home plate on the baby field, you would be looking at this field.
Okay, all right, right, okay. It's 7.
Yes.
Okay.
It's 7. I will add this. I mean, the Freeman Kennedy fields, they're great fields, but one thing they are not are laid out in a pattern that works perfectly. But it's not because anyone didn't plan, it's because they were built over probably some of those fields are 70 years old. And they were built naturally in a progression. So actually on Field I, one of the projects we're doing this fall, there's a sinkhole that I could fill every once, because they took the trees down and they probably dumped them where they thought there would never be a field. And then they built a field. But so we're, all those, so that's one of the projects recreation, but that's going to be about 5,000.
Does anyone have any other questions on this one? I think we're all set, Ann. Thank you. Cindy, are you here for that, or
that, or I'm sure you're going to, sorry, going to bring up any of our other.
I don't think so tonight. Yeah.
All right.
I think, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that we've been joined by Rob Garrity. Rob, you're here. Hi, Rob's here. And at this point, then I'll turn it over to the school. Ingrid.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to come and speak tonight. I am taking care of a family member who just had surgery, so I have my mask on, but if you can't hear me, let me know. So we have Justin Thibault here from AI3, who is the architecture firm that worked with the Norfolk schools on feasibility study. I think Erica, if you can help Justin share his screen, we have a few slides to go through. I wasn't exactly sure what information you were seeking tonight. We did present on this project previously when we looked for funding for, for the feasibility portion of it. And we've held a couple of community forums. So we have all of the slides from our most recent community forum. We can walk through project history and provide any more details on any of the areas that you require me on. Be good for me to continue? Okay. Okay, great. So we have begun looking at concerns around growing enrollment and development in town back in 2017. We had a lot of feedback from the public and from parents who were concerned with all the Chapter 40B projects going through, the fairly large scale developments and housing developments across town. So back in 2017, we worked with the town to put together a space study committee. There were broad membership on that from the town side as well as from the school side. And we looked at what we were anticipating for projected enrollment and what potential solutions would be to what we expected would be a space shortage. Back in 2018, we had contracted with NESDEC, which is the New England School Development Council, and they did a demographic study for us to try to get a sense of what the enrollment may look like over the next 5 to 7 years. We were very fortunate that NESDEC worked closely with Rich McCarthy, the town planner, who provided all of the data for that study and worked with them throughout the process. When we looked at that initial demographic study, there was projections that over the next 10 to 15 years, we would be seeing an increase in enrollment of about 250 students. Obviously, that's very concerning. So we moved forward with looking at what the potential options might be. There were several that we explored that we'll get into as we go through the slides. But based on all of the different scenarios we looked at, which was the potential of developing an early childhood center offsite, the potential of looking at mobile classrooms that we would temporary modular classrooms that we would add to each campus. So we looked at a lot of different things. We'll get into those. It appeared that the most cost-effective solution for the town would be to move forward with a single building project. So rather than expand HOD that is currently out of space and Freeman Kennedy, it seemed more cost-effective to do one building project that would meet the growing needs in both sites. So we, in 2008, went to the town and secured funding to have an architectural firm, Flansburgh, that designed the Freeman Kennedy School, do a very, very cursory assessment of whether or not a building project could be completed. The Freeman Kennedy School was selected as a model school site for the state through the Mass School Building Authority. What that meant is that when architects submitted their design plans for a building, they had to have future expansion plans drafted so that districts that wanted to save costs on design could adopt a model school with the capacity to make it bigger or a lot smaller. So in the original design, Flansburgh expansion possibility was to connect the two back wings of the Freeman Kennedy School. So in 2018, we hired them to map out, look at the enrollment studies, look at what the needs were, and do a rough estimate of whether or not there was sufficient space between the two connecting wings if we did a two-story addition to meet all of the growth demands. That presentation and Flansburgh and the demographer came to the select board in 2019, and we presented the findings from that very preliminary study as well as the enrollment projections. And we decided, we represented both the school committee and to the select board to submit an application to the Mass School Building Authority for an expansion project. The intent of that proposal was if MSBA accepted the application, they would cost share the expansion. Growth and space shortage and crowding are a reason that you can apply to MSBA. We have brought that forward to the select board and the school committee every year since, and we have submitted 4 applications to the MSBA for cost sharing for this project. Unfortunately, during that period of time, we went through the global pandemic with COVID-19. MSBA was bombarded with requests for building projects. There are many, many schools across the Commonwealth that are old buildings that have poor ventilation. and other conditions that made them a priority for MSBA. So we have not received funding for the project through those 4 application cycles. In conversations with MSBA, that's probably going to be the case going forward because they are addressing schools that they have significant concerns about safety or health. So they have told us that we could continue to apply, but it was very unlikely that we would be receiving funding at this stage. As a result, we felt that it was important that we move forward with looking at what the options would be for the town of Norfolk if MSBA does not participate. So last year we came to the town meeting to seek appropriation to do a full feasibility study, which would really go in much more depth than the original Flansburgh work to do site testing, traffic studies, all of the components to see whether or not this expansion would really be feasible for the town. Flansburgh did that work last year, completed that in May. AI3, we switched to AI3, completed that study. Sorry, Justin, I know I can't see you, but they did that study for us over the course of the entire year last year, submitted a draft report to us to review at the end of May. We shared that with the school committee, looked at it over the summer. That report has been finalized and is on our website. And so through their feasibility study, they did determine that this would be the best cost-effective long-term solution for the town going forward. I'm going to let Justin walk through a little bit of the elements of the feasibility study. I did send you a link to the second or third community forum that we held. The last community forum. So all of this is in more detail available for you if you want to go back and see any of it. But I'll turn it over to Justin to walk through some of the foundational pieces.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Superintendent. So good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Tebow. I am a principal at AI3 Architects. And as Dr. Alardi mentioned and discussed, the previous options studied are what's shown up on the screen. So 5 different options were studied initially. Purchase a new site for a construction project, look at temporary modular classrooms at HOD, look at a second floor at HOD, look at temporary modular classrooms at Freeman Kennedy, and then the new construction expansion at Freeman Kennedy. All of these marked in red were deemed not advantageous to the town of Norfolk, whether it be cost, whether it be physical site constraints, whether it be building constraints. For instance, the second floor at HOD would require way more work than necessary just to support a second floor, for instance. So the study landed on the new construction expansion at Freeman Kennedy being the most cost-effective and, again, long-term solution, moving away from temporary modular classrooms and really building a permanent solution to support Norfolk, the school district, and the teacher delivery throughout. So I'm going to go over some of these slides really quick. We can always come back, but this is high level from what was shown and presented at the community forums. So as part of the process, once AI3 was involved, we engaged on an educational program update, understanding that the district already did this previously with Flansburgh approximately 12 years ago. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We just wanted to re-engage 4 specific focused conversations related to the items on the screen to really determine the actual ideal fit and size of the building, adjacencies, and the programs for this expansion project. As part of that conversation, we are looking at the NESDEC enrollment forecast, really identifying the proper size of this addition and expansion. So
I just jump in there. I should have said before we brought the request to the town to do the feasibility study, we did contract with NESDEC and have them do an updated demographic study to make sure that conditions hadn't changed since 2017. We really wanted to look at, were the original projections still holding? Were there additional factors or considerations we needed to take into account? Again, I thank Rich for working closely with NESDEC to update those. So these projections are from the updated study that was completed on May 2nd, 2022.
Yep, correct. And based upon the updated projections, The enrollment projections identified on the right are really what the project is identifying. So the pre-K enrollment projections is 64. However, we're going to come back to that in a second. Grades K through 2 is 461, and grades 3 through 6, it's 688. Now, these numbers are pulled from the 5-year projection, so the 2026-2027 school year. And for demographers, 5 years out is the ideal projection forecast because of a lot of different factors. That is the most accurate because of the possible developments happening in town, permitting applications, acceptance on permits, as well as actual physical construction occurring. 5 years out is the ideal for the most accurate enrollment forecast projections. Once you get to 10 years, it's not as accurate because some of those approved planning developments could have fallen through by then. So 5 years out, you really have a better handle on it. So the numbers on the right are what were identified as the enrollment projections. Back to the pre-K component, identified as 64. Currently, there was 60 identified. The 64 was only a slight increase. Now, we understand that there is, on average, 60 families on the wait list for the pre-K, which would bump that up to 124 enrollment students in the pre-K component. This project scaled back that 124 to 1, and we identified 105 as the ideal number for the enrollment. So not up to the full 124 as identified in the enrollment projection. However, significantly reducing the current wait list. So the target enrollment for pre-K would be 105.
Can I stop you there, Justin? Do you have a question about that specifically, Brian?
I do. So the 1,031 pre-K through 6 matches what the state reports our enrollment as of 22. You show that we're anticipating here the projection to go up to 1069 in 23. But if you look at what was reported to the state, we actually went down to 1016.
We did talk about that at the last
Right.
meeting. So we had a 1-year drop in enrollment. The projections have been tracking pretty close to the NESDEC forecast. Last year, the enrollment did dip by about, from our prior year's enrollment by about 20 students. We are re-looking at that. It's really difficult to assess the impact of the pandemic and COVID-19 on enrollment. It has trended back up this year. We picked up another, from last year, we picked up another 40 students. So it is starting to recover.
But that's still below the 1069 projected for this year.
It is. Yeah, but we are starting to see that trend up. And we are talking about redoing, if we move this forward, redoing another enrollment study to try to correct and assess what that's going to look like. Like I said, it's really hard to, buildings slowed down, building supplies slowed down, construction, houses coming on the market, everything sort of slowed down unexpectedly. So we're trying to tease out what that impact is. But we have seen an annual increase of about 20 students or a class full of students since 2018-19.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah.
So Brian said this year, but this year is 23-24, right?
Yes.
So what's the number this year? What's your
1040, I think, if you said it is.
10?
22-23 is consistent.
Yeah, but you said it went up 40 from there.
We're in 23-24.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
So what are we in? Sorry.
I don't have the pre-K number. I have the K-6 number in front of me, which is 984 plus we have about 64 students for kindergarten. So it's close to that,
All right.
that number.
Thank you.
With the pre-K.
From, I've been volunteer coordinator for, feels like 20 years, but not 20 years. I don't think ever been 2012 where it's seen.
Yeah, but we at that time did not have full day kindergarten. So we had 2 classes of kindergarten sharing 1 physical space. And we have increased numbers of special ed students in specialized programs since then. So that's part of that.
And you didn't have a pre-K program in 2012, did
Our
you?
pre-K enrollment is growing. And the way that pre-K programming works is if a child is identified with a special educational need, they're eligible for public education as of their 3rd birthday. We have to maintain a ratio of students with typically developing peers to make those classrooms fully integrated classrooms. So we have a ratio of about 50% of our students that are there because they have a learning disability and 50% peer models. Our numbers of students entering town, our special education enrollment is increasing. So we have had to expand the pre-K in order to meet that need and that demand, and that continues to trend upward.
Thank you. Sorry, Justin. Thank you.
Not a problem. So taking the information from the
I
education.
have one more question on that. Then if we look out to the 2030 timeline, like it shows a net drop off, right? So you highlighted the peak and then it starts to drop off again to where we are today.
Well, let me speak to that a little bit. When Justin was talking about the first 5 years are the most accurate projections. And the reason for that is that NSDAP as a demographer, when they're doing the enrollment study, will only consider projects that are under construction. So anything in the queue is not in these projections. Anything, because as building projects go through the different phases of approval, sometimes the scope changes, the size of the units, the number of the bedrooms. So they don't include anything. So this only includes the projects that we are currently in process of building. It doesn't include any future growth, which we know is likely to happen, but they can't they have no way to calculate that. So that's why they suggest we do the projections every 3 to 5 years.
And so then I'm confused about where the 250 comes from.
Those are the things already under approval, or under.
The 250, this is, none of those are 250 higher than your base year. So
we were looking from the 2018 year. So from when we first started this project.
Okay, so 213 is 250 higher than the 218.
Can you tell me the numbers again?
The 1213 is 250 higher than the base year, which was 2018.
That was 951. Those two is about 1251.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
Not a problem. So taking all the information, all the conversations with the district, what we have on the screen here is a space summary. And really, this is an inventory of spaces. It's identifying all of the program spaces by name, by quantity, and by size, and what is required to support the educational delivery based on the enrollment projections, based on students per classroom, based on the specialists that are needed, the support staff. And what it does is that it's a smart sheet, and you input everything, and at the bottom it will tabulate and it will identify the total building gross floor area. So that's including the grossing factor. So what was identified after all of these conversations within the feasibility study that was finalized this year was an expansion project of just over 36,000 square feet. And that would support all the district's needs based on all these conversations. One item to note is that the previous study done in 2019, again, was, as superintendent mentioned, it's a high-level study. It was initially identified as approximately 30,000 square feet. After further investigation and a really thorough deep dive by the design team this go around, it was identified as a 36,000 square foot expansion project to really meet the district's needs. So looking at it from
Can we go back to that for a second?
Let's talk about that.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, so I know DESE does, you need so much gym space, you need so much closet space, but and I can't see this because I'm blind, but I would assume we're not counting new gym space because
No.
we're not counting new utility space. This is like classroom stuff.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we opted to move the preschool up and put the early childhood center at the Freeman is that creates open classroom space at the HL of day to accommodate new growth there. But our preschool does not eat in the cafeteria. They don't participate in gym, music, art. So there wouldn't be additional demand from those students on those instructional spaces.
The plan looks like the first floor is office.
The first floor is preschool, and we're also moving the special education department offices that are currently at each elevator over. So the first floor is all the preschool early childhood, and the second floor is just classrooms.
Right. Perfect segue.
So I'm still like, I know it doesn't work, the math doesn't work like this, but I'm still trying to figure this out, that we're projecting 150 more students than where we are today. And we're going to add 36,000 square feet for another 150 students.
We're already out of space at Angela Day, so we lost the computer lab, we've lost the music space. So it's to recover some spaces, and we've lost some spaces at the Freeman Kennedy as well. The science lab's currently a classroom. So we have been absorbing these students by giving up educational spaces that are needed for programs. So it would recover those as well.
So how many classrooms do you have now at Freeman Kennedy?
Justin, do you have that map to bring up?
I believe it's 25. Give me 1 second. Freeman Kennedy, there are 27 classrooms.
Yeah.
Move on, gentlemen. Go ahead, Justin.
Okay, so looking at it, how it materializes into the floor plans, as just alluded to and talked about, the first floor would be the pre-K component. That's allowing them to have a separate entry. The special education department would move over and become that control point for the pre-K component of the project. It would include the classrooms, any of the support spaces as well, really creating that connector between the two grade 3-4 wing and then the grade 5-6 wing. Second floor is the elementary school classroom. So classrooms for grades 3 through 6, as well as providing some spaces, again, as the superintendent just mentioned, taking back some of those spaces. Some of the spaces lost based on the current overcrowding. Some of those would be embedded within here. So the art classroom and 2 science/STEAM classrooms would be located within this space to make up for the current science and art classrooms that have been modified and or lost. One item that I do want to note is the items or the rooms shown in green are within the existing facility. So as part of the expansion project, it allows some spaces to relocate to be more centrally aligned and or embedded where their services are needed. For instance, on the right here, we have the speech office, social worker's office, and psychologist's office. What this location does is that it takes the existing footprint and the existing rooms that are already there, and it just relocates these specialists within that space in a central location, easy access for all students within all grade levels, not just say down the 6th grade wing or the 4th grade wing. So by allowing the some of the overcrowding to be addressed within the new expansion project, it allows spaces to move around to better support the delivery and the support of the students.
Can you go back to the first floor for just a second? Yep. Went pretty quick for me. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pre-K classrooms being added.
Yes.
And the class enrollment is what per class?
Currently, we have 5 preschool classrooms.
But what is the typical pre-K size?
Typically, a class is between 13 and 15 students. Although we have a growing population of students in our autism developmental delay program, that class size is significantly smaller, and some students are participating in discrete child or small individual instruction within that. So 2 of our classrooms are substantially separate and have about 7 students in them.
So this sizing would allow us to actually get over 100. I know you're targeting 90 something too.
Well, what we were trying to do with this is we know that 5 of the classrooms will already be occupied. It would allow us to potentially bring in about another 25 to 30 students. It would not allow us to take all the students off the wait list. But if growth continues the way that we expect and our special education population grows as expected, we will have to add a classroom, at least 1, possibly 2, to meet the needs of those new 3-year-olds. So it's a conservative estimate, but we wanted to make sure, because we have had some feedback from the town, we don't want to underbuild and then come back to you and say we can't accommodate the growth that we were anticipating happening. So this plan gives us 2 additional classroom spaces that would allow us to grow the preschool to meet the required demands of new students that we're expecting to come in. And with that, because we have a peer model where they're integrated classrooms, we'd be able to take some new students in off the wait list. But we know, I think throughout this, have been very conscious of the fact that the town just built a fire station, which was obviously desperately needed to appropriately support our emergency staff. We've tried to be really conservative. We've tried to cut out any extra spaces. There's only classroom spaces in here. As just been talked about, we just mentioned we lost the science center this year, or the science lab.
Maybe I misunderstood you. There's not just classroom spaces in here. The classrooms are 17,000 of the 36,000. In fact, the majority of it is not classroom space, right?
No, there are classroom spaces. There's some office space. We are relocating, as Justin said, we lost the science lab. So when you see in the new addition, science lab, that allows us to reclaim. The other one is a classroom. So it is primarily driven by classroom, but some of the spaces are relocated. We're moving the existing computer lab to the new space so that we can make that a classroom. So some of the spaces are relocated to create open classrooms in the existing structure.
That's on the second floor.
Yeah, on the second floor.
Susan?
I have a few questions. Is there really a need for a computer lab going forward in the future? I know that for years we needed computer labs, but at the point that our kids are at now, every kid has a computer, or we're going to move to either tablets or computers for each kid in their classroom. So having a computer lab seems like it's probably a waste of technology, a waste of space. I don't know if you've, I think that has been discussed, because by the time this is built, we're talking another few, I mean, when my middle daughter was in the middle school, they didn't have computers. When my second child started 3 years later, they all got their own computer on the first day of school. So it's going that way. Within 3 years, that's probably going to be what's going to happen.
So we have, in keeping with that, you're right. The demands for technology have shifted. We have converted our computer, what used to be considered a computer lab, to maker spaces, and that supports our engineering, robotics, design, technology, STEM instruction. So we have a lot of robotics equipment in there. We have green screen. So we are trying to meet the new digital literacy and learning standards. You can't have all that stuff in a classroom.
Yeah, I think that just we need to be mindful of the fact that technology moves at such a fast pace that by the time this is built, the technology that we're putting into it and the technology that we're planning for is already going to be on its way to being not necessarily obsolete. That's obviously hyperbole, but I'm just saying it's going to be on its way. You know, it just moves so quickly. It's hard to plan for that, and I'm not sure planning for a large computer lab is the best way to go. That is one. Number two, I understand that what you said was you looked into modular options and they were let go fairly early on. I guess how in depth did we go in looking at I understand we don't want to do temporary modular, I'm not talking about trailers, but there is a lot of schools, including Hopkinton, which is the #1 school in the state of Massachusetts that has permanent modular solutions, which they're built to be added onto the school and they look just like the school. They're sort of ready to look that way. And they're not, Harvard uses them. We're not talking about trailers. This is not what I mean. So I just want to be clear about that. Permanent modular building is part of the future. Building costs, brick and mortar has become so expensive that this is the way that a lot of people are going. So I would like to know how in depth we really went into looking at that. This is a huge, huge ask on the town. And as a big proponent of the school that you know I am and have always been, a lot of money to ask. We need to be prepared to have a reason why this is our only option. This brick and mortar that's going to cost an enormous amount of money. We have to know. We have to be able to tell the town that we did absolutely everything. So I'd like to know how in depth he went with that and why he eliminated those options.
So we can certainly, and I know Justin, you have another slide in the deck, and we can talk a little bit about the challenges. I don't disagree that modulars are used in a lot of places. There's site conditions and other factors here that make that not a significantly less expensive option for Norfolk. So do you want to jump to that, Justin? We can talk through some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the challenges in looking at potential modular classrooms at each Olive Day is the sight lines or the property that we own. We're built to the outer limits of the H Olive Day. There is conservation land behind the school building. If we wanted to look at the potential of getting a variance, we really can't.
You
But
can't.
even if
It's
we
actually
could,
now actually against state law to take conservation land.
Okay.
Unless you can provide.
so then that rules that all out. But what we did look at when we looked at this, if you were to build modular classrooms and add on to the H Olive Day, as soon as you connect them, we are required to bring the entire building up to the current code for ADA compliance. When we just had that looked at, was at least $1.5 million of costs of upgrades. And based on estimates from our facilities director, when you pay prevailing wage, that almost doubles the cost of addressing those compliance issues. So it's probably about $3 million just to bring the building to code. In terms of, again, we don't have options of going backward if it's against the law. If we were to go sideways, you also have to put a new roadway in. All of the systems at each Olive Day are at capacity. So the septic would need to be replaced. We can't add on to the current septic, electric systems. So before you even look at leasing modulars, you're looking at an $8,000 or $9,000 cost at least. Justin, is that accurate?
8 or 9 million.
I'm sorry, 8 or 9 million.
It's like, sign me up.
Now we've been a really good deal.
Sign me up.
Now we've been a really good deal. Sorry. About 8 or 9 million before you even look at leasing the modular classrooms. Would you say that's accurate, Justin?
Yeah, the site work and the utility work, the infrastructure required on this specific site for HO Day for adding modulars is extremely cost prohibitive. As superintendent noted, there's so many red flags from a development standpoint. I mean, you can do it, but it just costs a significant amount of money. And in the end, you have modular classrooms. Yeah, I know there are different levels of modulars, temporary modulars, some that are a little bit better built. But the initial work and cost for just to even put a shovel in the ground is extensive on this particular site. If you could even find a spot of land on site to put it.
And then once you did that, you only get enough to offset the growth in H Olive Day. Then you would have to move up and do the same at the Freeman Kennedy School. Justin, do you want to show the Freeman Kennedy potential option? Yeah. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, I can talk through this one. So the other option is we did look at modulars at Freeman Kennedy, not just for the Freeman Kennedy population, but for the overcrowding at HOD. So if the pre-K component and the additional classrooms required did land as modulars at Freeman Kennedy, it's approximately 70 by 250 based on the bays and the configuration. We have had recent costs and procurements on other projects as early as this year, early in 2023. So the numbers on the right are rough estimates for what a modular system would be. So for this site, utilities, a little bit of work, not nearly as much as HOD. You would lose some parking, but it is relatively flat. And so that definitely helps save some cost. Initial site construction cost is approximately $3 million. The modular mobilization and setup for a size of a modular component that would support the needs and the enrollment is approximately $7 million. So you're in this for $10 million just to get the doors initially open. Now, these modulars are leases, and typically it's at minimum a 3-year lease. And based on what we've seen in other districts, it's going to be approximately $3 million a year to lease these units. So initially $10 million, 3-year lease at $3 million each. So you're up to $19 million. There is an option to buy back after that first 3 years. And what we've seen on other projects, again, it's approximately $11 million. So you take your 19 million, you add your 11 million, you're up to $30 million for these modular classrooms on the site. So, and that's if you choose to do the buyout. If you choose to continue to lease them, you can see the cost just escalates. Couple other items related to modulars, though, as the superintendent noted, these would not be connected to the existing building. So students and staff would have to walk outside of the existing building to access these modulars. And that's for a lot of different reasons related to building code, primarily, as well as life safety, which that alone with 2 separate buildings on a campus creates security concerns, multiple entry points, who's going where, people, where do they check in? So that is a big concern. Additionally, modular units we're limited from a design perspective as far as sizing, as far as configuration, because it needs to fit within the modular. And really looking at a way to support the education and the educational delivery of the district, it really becomes a little bit of a handcuff within these modular units. So yeah, you would physically have the space. Is it an ideal teaching environment? I wouldn't say it is for just because of the handcuffs of the design elements. So you're in this roughly 30 million for these modular classrooms. Again, as I mentioned, pros and cons of each, but I'll pause there because that's a ton of information. I'm sure there are questions.
One of the things you brought up is additional entry points. I thought you said there was going to be additional entry points for pre-K anyway. Is that?
Yeah, but what Justin's referring to is depending on how you structure the modules. With the pre-K entrance, we're moving the special education offices so that there is somebody buzzing and admitting through the entryway any visitors to the school. You don't have that if there's direct access to classrooms in the modulars. Do you see what I'm saying? And there's also one door. There's not multiple doors through that access point. So it's monitored. I think it's a two buzz entry containment that was designed like all of our others, so that you buzz people in, you get a visual screen before you then admit them into the physical structure of the building.
Yeah.
So and the modular units, we wouldn't have an administrative staff. We wouldn't have somebody monitoring. They're strictly classrooms.
Yeah, to add on to that, the bigger concern would be not necessarily for the pre-K students, but for the middle school students. So middle school students would be within this modular classroom just because, the elementary students, the grades 3 through 6. So they would be within this modular classroom. And they're still utilizing spaces like the gymnasium, the cafeteria, all those other shared spaces that are within the main building. So the pre-K students would be within the modulars from start to finish, but the elementary students would be transitioning back and forth outside of one building into another and vice versa, back and forth all day long to access these other shared spaces. So that is primarily the security concern on this campus with a 2 separate building approach.
Susan, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one quick follow-up to everything you just said. And I don't want to come across as argumentative, so please don't take it that way. I just want to make sure that we're getting when we ask these questions at town meeting, we're getting accurate information. Are you saying that you looked into permanent modular and the only option is to lease? Because I looked into it and you can actually buy them outright and they have a 50-year lifespan. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. I'm not saying it's the right choice for Norfolk, so please don't take it that way. I was not part of the study and I did not do the legwork for this, but there is some things that I have looked into. And they do have a 50-year lifespan, which is similar to any building that you can build, and you can buy them outright. So I just want to make sure we're giving all of the most accurate information. Are we talking about the same thing?
So yes and no. Let me clarify. You can buy these. However, you have to lease them for the first 3 years. So after your 3-year lease, then you can buy them outright. So yeah, that is a true statement. The modular companies that we have worked with in the past and have experience with, you need that initial leasing period because to be honest with you, that is where they make their money. But after 3 years, they're willing to sell them to the district, to the town, to the owner, to whomever, seeing it's already on site. As far as the life expectancy of modulars, a wood building that is in an educational use lasting 50 years, based on modular construction, I would personally be surprised. It is not the same as a permanent solution, particularly in the educational environment. It's a different type of construction. And I'm not saying it's not out there, but that is not what we looked at here. We looked at a solution that would give you a 20-year or so life expectancy. Now, with that, this 20-year life expectancy is $30 million. If we did want to look at a 50-year life expectancy for modulars, then that cost would only escalate significantly just to provide the different types of materials, the different construction types within the modular system. So I don't know if that answered your question or confused it even more. Did that help?
I'm going to be honest, it's a little confusing because I'm not speaking of wood modular, we're speaking of metal. This, we could go on for days and I don't want to consume any more time. I just want to make sure that before we go to town meeting, we have all the potential answers ready. And I think that's going to be a good one. And when I say they're popping up all over Massachusetts, they are all over Massachusetts. Every town is, not every town, obviously Norfolk doesn't have one, but many, many, many towns. Andover has them. One of the W towns, I can't remember what, Wellesley, Weston, it doesn't matter. One of the W towns. And Hopkinton has them, Harvard has them. So I mean, they are definitely being touted as a great cost-effective solution to building, with building costs where they are, and only continuing to go up. I think it's something that we should have someone look into. I'm not saying that we have to put anything off. I just think that it can be done at the same time. And I think that, you know, we need to be prepared to answer those questions at town meeting. So. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're right. Where, is there any more questions on this? Or we?
Yeah, I got a question about modular.
Yeah, sure.
So if modules don't go there, we're gonna get 17,500 feet of space. But if we build, we need more than double that. We need 36,000 feet of space. And in 2019, we needed 30,000 feet of space, assuming a 20% increase in student population. We've seen less than half of that increase, but we want to increase the size of the project by 20%. Can anyone enlighten me on how we hit these numbers?
Real quick. This would be a 2-story modular getting you to that 36,000 square feet. So your calculations of the 1750 is accurate, but it would be 2 stories. We didn't want to take up a lot of the site, the landscape, your playing fields, green space within that. So these would be 2-story modulars.
So it's roughly the same square footage.
Right.
That's the footprint. In other words, double it, I guess.
Okay, so it wouldn't just be a 1 floor. And you're saying these modules can't be designed to have proper entry and egress and man traps and those sort of things?
They can. What I was saying is that we weren't in the design that we have, we moved an office space, our receptionist area, so that we would have somebody there manning the entrance rather than, and we wouldn't have another administrative staff or reception.
So what's the difference between staffing an entrance in a new building if it's attached to the front, or staffing an entrance to the back? It still requires the same staff member. Why wouldn't there be one out back?
Oh, I see what you're saying. If we put the preschool and early child, that's possible. I hadn't thought about it that way. So you could potentially have I don't know how did you account for a reception area in the modular, Justin?
Yeah, there would be an entrance area. However, you're still going to have elementary students walking outside from building to building, which would be a security concern from our perspective.
Those kids walk outside to go to the playground and to go to recess, to the buses, cars, their parents pick them up, right?
Yeah, they do go
Okay.
outside to recess and in. I think what he's talking about is if you have 6 classes and they all have gym at different periods, there's people in and out all day long rather than just during a couple of periods a day where you have that staff.
Go ahead, Rob. I don't want to distract, but what's going on with the field that this old school used to be on? No, but I mean, if you moved the baseball field to that field and there's plenty of room, you could put the modulars closer.
Well, there's town owned land. It's
No.
school owned.
No. Next to the modular space, the old Freeman is where that nice big green spot is.
Yeah.
Oh, the recess field.
That's the recess field? Okay, I've never driven by there during recess, so okay, thank you. Rob?
So now I have a space question. So when I moved to town 100 years ago, right, we had 520 kids in HOD and like every grade, and I know that K is different, right? You had half day, K, but you had 150 kids in K then, which is basically 75. Right now you got, 128, so it's 50 more in kindergarten. But the grades, like grade 1 had 152, 173, 145. You're under that in HOD now. Freeman's Kennedy has about as many kids as it had when we opened it. Right? I've been, as you know, been involved in town politics for a while. I've seen every one of these projections on growth just not happen. All right. If we're talking about 250 more kids, you're talking about probably 2,000 or 200 more kids. You're talking about 2,000 more people in town. And we have been, we're not going to go from 11,000 right now to 14,000, 11,000 change to 14 in like 5 to 10 years. And the houses they're building are not conducive to 3-kid families. The whole student population in Massachusetts is crashing. Now we're staying steady. It's down like 80,000, I think, over the last 10 years. All right, the demo is changing. We're having those kids, yeah. And you're not going to have them in one of these. This is the community for old parts like me. When we go in the trade and not drive anywhere. That's what these houses. So if you want to do this as we need to do a pre-K, and a pre-K is it's going to be huge, so we need its own building. Then that's one thing. And I want to put these classrooms back. What's the total number of actual classrooms that the new building would have at the addition?
Upstairs, Justin, can you go to the second?
Well, but there are those green classrooms that are now in the new plan would be specialty rooms. Were they classrooms before?
Some of them are, again, the science lab, which is now a classroom, would be moving and reclaimed as a classroom. So what you're looking at is what we looked at was where would we move current classrooms so that they'd be better located.
So like reading specialty, right, on the southern wing there?
Yeah.
Right now, is that a classroom or is that a special room?
They're in part of that classroom.
All right, and the classroom that's labeled math specialist up top, it's part of classroom?
Yeah.
And it'll just be a total specialist room?
Yeah.
So
because they anticipated to be serving more students too.
So we're gonna go from 27 classrooms to what?
Justin, do you have that? I think it's 20 for the upper grades. I think it's 20. You have that in the chart.
Classrooms.
You're breaking up, Justin.
Sorry, we're adding 6 classrooms.
I see you're adding 6 classrooms and then you're adding another room, but aren't you repurposing some rooms that are right now classrooms into specialist rooms? So you're not netting 6 classrooms.
You have I think in one of your charts, you have the number of classrooms total in the new design.
Mm-hmm.
Below, going from 27 classrooms to 33 classrooms.
Right.
Yeah, 7 additional classrooms.
That's true. Because I think you're turning some classrooms into specialty rooms. Isn't that what the green classrooms are in the wings?
No, it's a little confusing. Those are current classrooms that we're moving in the building because they are located in not ideal locations. So we're trying to, the speech offices currently have a location. We're recommending moving them to a different, so those are reassignments or moves of current existing spaces. We would regain the science lab, which is now a classroom. So that's the one thing we would regain there. And then that's put into the addition. So that would become
When did we
one of
build
the
the
33
addition?
classrooms.
When did we build the addition HOD?
90.
Okay, so in 2005, pre-addition, we had 530 kids in HOD. And then you put addition on it.
HOD predated 2005.
It was like 1990.
So 95, you didn't have the addition because I was the first year in town.
Those third grade.
No, we're talking about.
That says
we're talking about HOD.
So the wing of the
HOD.
HOD day was,
Yeah.
I don't know the date on that. I think it's,
It's late 90s.
Kids
It's late 90s.
for the addition.
Oh,
So-
it's 644 in the old Freeman building, and I know that because I just looked it up and I saw how many, I'm just Freeman alone, how many pieces of volunteer forms that we printed out was 644 for Freeman.
And
So, and that was in the old building in 2012.
which is an abomination.
Correct.
so we have 164 in our current kindergarten. At that time, we would have 2 half days. So we would, if you cut that class size in half, it would have been 82 students because we used one classroom twice for 2
Yeah.
different classrooms.
Yeah. But
And then we have, again, additional special education, specialized programs that we have now at each holiday that we didn't have. And we've taken over more classrooms to serve the needs of the students in pre-K.
So I think you just have to be very clear about this.
Yeah.
You know, we're not talking about, this isn't really a capacity issue on like the number of kids. This is, education has changed since we built these schools. We need different setups. We don't have 22 and a half kids in every classroom. That's all we got. We got 17 kids here. We got 3 kids in this pullout. We got 2 kids in this pullout. You know, I think you're going to get trouble at town meeting and in the election if we paint it as this thing when the numbers are very easy to say, well, you're like 60 away, 60 less than you have up in Longton, you know?
Yeah, no, I think there are programmatic changes and changes to how we're delivering services that are also driving this.
Yeah. So,
For that.
so looking at the net classroom changes total, we're going from 52 to 65. So 13 classrooms for a total increase of 150 kids beyond where we are today, projected.
For 50.
For over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And again, then we need to redo the projections because they're not considering, and we did look, Rob, I can share the enrollment study. NESDEC as demographers, they don't do it just bedroom per child.
Mhm.
They really look at the patterns and trends. So we just did for Rich, projections on if you do the apartment buildings and housing needs to meet the requirements because we're a commuter town, and we're not projecting any impact on the schools for those. Because 2-bedroom apartments don't attract families with children. So we really looked at, and NESDEC looked at the trend data about the size of the houses, the location, the access to green space, all of the things that do drive the impact in return for students in those houses.
You
So
can't afford to have kids with the price of houses in this town.
I
But
hear that.
I
That's
think there's a lot of kids that would be in
another
2-bedroom.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of kids who would live in 2-bedroom apartments with their parents.
Not
Based on the housing data,
out here.
the studies that have been done, there is a lower yield for, and we.
It's not
just look
zero.
at what we see in Plainville and the apartments that have been built and how many students have shown up at school as a result of those. So it is consistently lower.
Go one more. Yes, please.
This particular topic and then.
Well, that's where I was gonna go.
Did you, Justin, again, just trying to preempt some questions, did you consider, there is and Justin, two Justin.
We have 2
Maybe
Justin.
able to be this more, I might be completely talking out of my brain here, but the town owns lands. But we have available lands in this town that we own, that have no buildings on them or the ability to do something with them. Have we, at any point during this process, because the feasibility study, to my understanding, was supposed to take every single option and run through the ringer and try to see what would potentially work. Have we, it sounds like the crux of the problem is we're out of space at H or D because of pre-K, which means we're going to have to move pre-K to Freeman, which then frees up some other tighter spaces at Freeman that, and now we'll have enough room in H or D. We actually thought about whether it be a modular or a regular building or retrofitting a building, putting pre-K somewhere else, completely off-site from H or D. That frees up H or D in kindergarten through second grade. We leave Freeman alone after our $25 million build of that to begin with. And we put modular or whatever retrofit a current building and house pre-K there. I mean, we're talking a playground, some septic, and some modular buildings. That can't be $50 million. And if that solves our problem as a town for 10 years, 15 years, just until we can get the fire station paid off, that we can sell. You see what I'm saying? Like, we can sell that to the town. We can convince the town that that is a necessary expenditure. And so I just want to know if that, seeing as though a feasibility study means everything's on the table, was that ever on the table? And if it wasn't, can it be on the table?
So I can speak to that. So the scope of this feasibility study was to look at a feasibility of an expansion project at Freeman Kennedy. It was not a feasibility to look at any possible option because the space study had previously looked at some of those considerations. We did talk at length about the idea of an alternate early childhood setting. Some of the challenges to that are, one, the construction costs. Second is transportation. We would have to restructure staffing, which will be an annual cost of the town because we would need a nurse in the building. We'd need an administrator in the building. We'd need a secretary in the building. We'd need a playground space, especially if it's early childhood. You would need a kitchen in that space because we do have some students that stay all day, especially students in our autism program. So it wasn't a super inexpensive option. And in addition to that, then we have 3 sites for transportation. We provide transportation to pre-K students that are require that as a service in order because of their disability, but parents would be picking up at 3 different sites across town, and it didn't save a significant amount of money.
Yeah,
it's but it didn't save a significant cost because of what we would offer.
And those are valid concerns, but none of that equates to a $50 million. None of it.
Right now,
You get 50.
we're not at a 50 million.
That's actually,
Not at a
hold on,
50 million.
back up,
We're asking for 4.
back up. Well, actually, that's not in the warrant, which was one of my questions, but before we go any further, do you have anything further, or does Justin have anything further you need to present to us? You feel you need to present to us? Or can
I'm
we
not
start
after
asking
what we've
questions?
shared. So Justin, I don't know where we were in the slide deck. If there's anything else that you feel is relevant.
You can probably skip the last slide that says questions, I think.
We're not going to ask any more questions.
No, never. Advisory board is not advisory board, not known for questions.
If there's nothing, I think
The project costs, because I do want to talk about that.
that's where I was going next.
Yep. So we'll condense this a little bit, and then if there are specific questions, we can definitely hop back. But as part of the process,
I'm talking about the total project costs, not the warrant article costs.
We're going to use
That-
that.
you can do both.
Yep. Yeah, you said the total project cost, construction costs, et cetera, that number?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so as part of the feasibility study, we had a professional cost estimate done. This estimator estimates educational facilities throughout Massachusetts, so they're really in tune with the market, where everything is going. It's broken down into a handful of categories. I'll just flip to the numbers. So what you see on top, these are the items that make up the cost right there for construction. So you have your building cost, then there's a handful of other items for mechanical system, chiller, rooftop units, existing playground updates. You have the site cost because there is site work that needs to be done, paving, playgrounds, etc. Then there's the cost for general conditions, phasing, insurance, contingency, etc. And that is the 7.6 down here. So you take all of these and you add them up and it equals 32.9 million. So that is the estimated construction cost. That's not total project cost. To get the total
To clarify on that one, there are 3 items on that list that are optional. They are not part of the addition cost. They are upgrades and things that need to be repaired at the current Freeman Kennedy School. And the facilities director and the committee felt that it would save the town money to do those while we have a team mobilized, because you need a crane to replace the upgrade, replace the chillers that are on the rooftop that currently run our HVAC system that are at end of life, surprisingly, but expectedly. Well, by the time you're doing this, you're 15 years. So they're at their end of life. I didn't do the original project, so I can't speak to that, but that was the expected life expectancy of that equipment.
The building, if you're attaching the addition, aren't you also gonna have to bring anything in Freeman up to code that maybe
That's
code
included
has
in it.
changed in the last 10 years? Not that it's necessarily update, but it's gonna.
It is, and that's included in that number. So there's 3 line items there that you could choose not to do at this time that equate to about 3 million. So that 32 million includes 3 million of current of required costs for the current structure that need to be upgraded. Due to life.
Okay.
So based on that, what you said, the modular cost would be more expensive than this.
It'll be, the research that we did, you're not gonna, it didn't appear that you're gonna save anything by going with the modular.
No, it would be more expensive because this includes 3.5 million of things that wouldn't be required on the modular.
But we haven't gotten to soft costs yet, just to be.
But you'd have those same stuff.
Yeah.
So
Which is why we are
you're
recommending
taking off
that.
about $3 million off of that. So it's 29, which is about, he said 30 for the modular. So.
Right.
Right, that's what I mean. This would be cheaper than modular, which doesn't make any sense at all.
Towns across the state wouldn't be doing it if it was more expensive.
I think some of that does have to do with the limited geography of where we're working. Towns across the state have in more than 2 school facility sites in their towns. They have schools
And they're
that
adding 2 classrooms.
they have schools that have been closed and repurposed. They have schools with bigger footprints. I mean, it's just
The cost of a modular building doesn't depend on whether or not you have multiple sites.
here it does, because the cost, we could sink it at Freeman, but you can't have one at HOD where the primary issue is you can't physically situate the modulars appropriately on the site. So there's one option, whereas if you're in Hopkinton, which I'm assuming has multiple, because you raised that, multiple elementary schools, multiple middle schools, you probably have more geography at your disposal to be using them in a more cost-effective way. I don't, I mean, I'm not married to one idea or the other. I want to do the thing that's going to be the cost-effective long-term solution. I'm not going to have any children attending these schools once this is a completed project. So I want to do the thing that's going to solve the problem. It's with the least financial impact on the taxpayers. And the modulars, there's a lot of hyperbole in all different directions, but just from a cost containment perspective, the permanent building solution here with what we're working with is the most cost-effective option that we've been presented with at this point, where we can ascribe hard costs to it and know what it's going to cost. That said, it's still in the design phase. Where we are right now is not to move forward with the project as is presented in the results of the feasibility study. It's to get to a schematic design point, to spend an additional amount of money, during which time it can be modified. I mean, the original proposal we saw from AI3 was larger by a factor of, was it 10%, Justin, 15% from a square footage standpoint?
Just over 15%.
And so, I mean, that's the goal has been to make this the leanest possible option that we can. Were permanent modulars feasible and cost effective? I personally don't have an aversion to them. I mean, I think that it's different. It's not, it's not a trailer. It's not a trailer like the, fire department was having. It's nothing, it's nothing like that. But I think that it's incumbent on us as a school committee and, eventually a building committee to educate everyone who's going to have a stake in this as to why this is the better option.
And I just want to get back to your question about if you're dispersing modular sites, classrooms over multiple buildings, then the impact on the play structure. If you're adding 150 students to a site, we need another playground structure to add that capacity. It has a different impact on the septic, the fire suppression, all of those systems, if you're adding 2 classrooms to a building versus 12
Yeah.
and a 2-story.
Justin, how much of this cost of the modular was driven by your choice of a 2-story modular instead of a single-story modular?
I would say not much, to be honest.
For the same square price per square foot?
It would be a little bit more economical to go with a single story, but not much at all, surprisingly, because the way they're constructed, it's very similar. It's just how they put them in place, how they assemble the pieces, as you will. So the actual construction methodology is similar for a single story versus a 2-story. So the cost wouldn't change that much. It might go down slightly, but it wouldn't be significant.
Okay, thanks.
Rob?
So the building construction costs and the bottom line phasing general conditions, blah, 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 blah. Those are desk estimates, right? I mean, it's fed into a computer pops it up. It's not really based on any of the materials that you're using. It's not based on a VE, everything on value exercise yet. It's a very soft and fluffy number. Now, design costs are based on a percentage of final project cost. So when the project is 24 million to actually build the school, and then another 24 million, so another 15 to whatever, 18 million in other things like, $1 million in playground equipment because that's what we need. And we're going to replace the entire fire alarm, which drives the design from like 2.5 million up to 4. And then we're just going to do a VE exercise once we're going to value engineer it, once we actually, have a design and we've gone through town meeting and we've gotten all the votes, and then the design comes in and we have to knock off another 1.5 million anyway. So what I'm saying is, why don't we just knock off money now to get the design number down? And arbitrarily take the 17.35 million, which is somewhat of an arbitrary number. There's a sketch, there's a schematic sketch. You can't tell me it's 17.35 on a schematic sketch because you don't know what the wall treatments are, we don't know what the floors are, we don't know what the FFE is, we don't know any of this stuff. So let's call it 12. Let's call it 12. What the hell? And let's take phasing down from 7.6 to 5.6, because then the architecture cost can go from 4 to 3.2 or something. I mean, this is after going to this, first of all, costs more than the last school did. Right?
And it's an addition.
It's 34.9, I think was the first sale point on the last school, and ended up as 37 from Kennedy over there. And I know it was in 2012, but you inflate that, it's only 49 million when you inflate it, because I just did the inflation number. So we're talking about it's $6 million of the cost of the whole school just to build this addition. Again, I go back to, I'm not taking a vote yet, but you are going to have a sales problem with this kind of scale. An enormous sales problem. I understand why we might need more playground equipment, different playground. That's what we're adding 100 kids to a school. I understand that, but people are going to look at $1 million and go nuts.
So, real quick, if I could just add a note of clarification there. So, this number, the 17.351 number, was based off of. It is early and it is based off of primarily a cost per square foot number. However, it is utilizing similar materials of the existing Freeman Kennedy. The intent of this is to have the expansion not look like a tacked on addition or a cheaped out version. It's utilizing the same material. So it's the same exterior cladding system. It's the same type of roof. It's the same type of flooring. And really that became the basis of design for what the cost per square foot of this facility is. So it wasn't just let's ballpark cost per square foot. There was a little bit of calculation based within this number.
And just we're going to be FFE when we actually, get to that point. And you're not going to have a computer lab because you're going to have to, we always have to take $500,000 off this project. So they're a computer lab. Because as we don't need one.
Well, I would, from an educational perspective, I think the makerspace is more critical now than ever in terms of preparing our kids for the market that they're going to go into, but that's a separate issue.
It's in script. Okay, I got to make this space at Northeastern, and I don't know that, they're in the 6th grade.
I don't necessarily think we should be debating the educational approaches at this point.
I would like to make one more point, with this, and I hope this doesn't offend you, Justin and Matthew. I certainly don't want to offend you right off the bat. Is there best word for this? Is there a conflict of interest, so to speak, with having the architect also be doing the feasibility study? When we did the thing.
I don't think you want to be asking Justin questions.
From this Justin and from the rest of you guys, when we did when we had the bill the warrant article come through a few years back, where we were doing to make Norfolk green, and we were spending X amount of dollars, which is like a feasibility study, to determine what we could change. One of the arguments was we had to pay someone to do it. Because if someone does it for free or whatever, they are building in their costs to make money off of it. And I'm not saying that that's what this is, but I'm saying it gives the appearance of impropriety when you're doing that. When you're also the one who's going to be getting the architectural bid for this.
This will go.
I can certainly speak to that. So,
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
so when we put out the bid specs for the feasibility study, it was to do a feasibility study on expansion at Freeman Kennedy. You need architectural insight into that. It did not guarantee future work to AI3. We have the option, based on the way the bid was written, if we want to pursue that or to bid it out to another vendor. So what they are proposing and what the work they did was just the feasibility, and that was how it was bid.
Okay,
Can,
that's a good answer. Thank you.
can we talk about that now? Yeah. The feasibility study, which is actually what's going to be on the town meeting warrant, unless someone else has other questions about this. That actually,
This.
No, it's
I'm sorry, the designs,
Design.
Schematic.
sorry,
Yeah.
the next step. Can we talk about that? Or is it, I mean, I think we're spending too much time taking this portion of the thing apart. Is that reasonable, folks? Can we talk about that part
I
of
have
it?
one stickler thing, just because I used to give budget presentations all the time. When you have numbers down to the $1, don't put million after them, because it really threw me off when I first looked at that. So just a stickler. My first thought was, is this $1 trillion project? And then I said, no.
Oh. That's really good.
Very good call. Yep. Apologize for that.
Oh, especially when it's after the ones that aren't even $1 million.
That are below $1 million. It gets very confusing.
Thank you. All right. So then the article itself is to fund a. Yes, I'm looking at the language. Construction. Okay, so and there's a cost somewhere to that. I heard $4 million earlier, but it's not in the actual article. And
Justin, can you speak to why
We can craft, so when you guys do the motion, you would put the figure in the motion.
okay.
At that time, when we were crafting it, we didn't have a figure in there, but once the motion's made here, that's the figure.
and Justin has that, so you can.
Is there, I mean, this is to raise, borrow, and appropriate, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a plan for that, Justin? How's the town planning on approaching that, or Ingrid, or is this?
You okay with me answering?
Yeah.
So the plan is to eventually go out for a debt exclusion for this for this article. You'll know at the bottom, so we have to be very technical with this language.
Yep.
So we had to have town council and bond council write off on this, and they all eventually approved this final language. But what we did do at the end of this article, we did say it's contingent, and we did it for the fire station as well, by the way. It's contingent upon affirmative vote of the voters at election to exclude from the limitation imposed by Proposition 2.5. To be pretty frank, we can't fund it within the levy, so it has to be a debt exclusion to fund the project. But
This article, if we vote affirmatively on this at town meeting, is the town moving towards a townwide vote
Yes.
based on
Yes.
that? Okay. Is
And
there,
we wouldn't, the select board would have to call for a special election. We don't want them to do that until after town meeting, because if it,
no, I
weren't
understand.
to
I don't want
yeah.
them to do it either.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
so it'll depend on the vote on, if it passes at town meeting, they would call, and then it would have to go to the ballot as well.
Is there a sense of when,
January
January
20th.
20th.
is there something else happening that day? Is there
Yes.
another election?
No, but that's the day, because it's usually.
That's why I was,
It's not an election year.
no, I understand that. That's why I was like, that number sounds too familiar. Did you have a question?
I do, and I'm sorry if this is moving us backwards in the discussion a little, so I'll apologize in advance and then just do it anyway. I understand we have to debate and vote on the warrant article that's, right? And we can't just rewrite it to something else and debate that. I understand that. However, I did want to build a little bit on Susan's question on if the core of the problem that we're trying to solve is an HOD problem, right? Space there, and we're going to solve that by moving the pre-K and then retool everything around, like trickling things down. But we're taking a HOD problem and solving it at Freeman. And Susan asked, why didn't we look at a third neutral site? I don't know if that's the right word, but non-HOD, non-Freeman Kennedy to solve that problem specifically. We'll regain some space at HOD. We can avoid all of this. We have the capacity at Freeman. And the
We
answer,
don't have the capacity at Freeman, so I do want to clarify
Okay,
that. We are expecting another 110 students.
we would be able, I think, squeeze people in. I don't think an addition at Freeman for the sake of Freeman I didn't hear that as being a problem. But what I wanted to touch on is the answer you provided to that was we didn't really look at a third site as an option now. Some of that was, initially looked at during the, I presume, initial feasibility study for Freeman as part of the modular, just forgive that term, but the design that would allow for expansion, et cetera. I think that answer, though, is contradictory to some other things that were also said. And what I mean by that is this school was built in 2002. So the feasibility, 2012, sorry, the feasibility and initial planning and this type of design probably dates back 5 years prior, 2006, 2007. Right. So one of the reasons you said why this was necessary and needed and those sorts of things is the nature of teaching has changed. We want different size classrooms. We're not going to have 22.5 kids in every classroom. We need maker spaces. We need smaller labs. Like the nature of what we're doing is changing. But if you, I guess my point is, I think that's contradictory to us not looking at a third site, because the feasibility that was done in 2006 or 2007 to get us to Freeman today, and then we use that as saying, well, that third site was looked at as the part of the original feasibility in 2006. The way you want to teach today was never contemplated as part of that original feasibility. I think we're compounding a problem. We're taking a feasibility study that got us to the current Freeman from 2006 standards, and we're now in 2023 using that as the basis for saying, well, we didn't look at a third option because some of that feasibility was done in 2006. I guess where I'm going with this is I think we're jumping in headfirst on a series of compounding decisions of, well, we have to move forward with this expansion, right? Because some feasibility decisions, studies, we got set on this path in 2006, right? Which led to Freeman, which led to the expansion, which now we're going back to saying, well, we didn't look at a third option because Freeman was built to expand. But I think if the educational standards and classroom shapes and flavors and needs have changed so much from when this was originally built, I would say all the more reason to say, let's not compound problematic, I don't want to say problematic decisions, but decisions that were made 15, 20 years ago that no longer will serve our needs. I just think with the cost of this, right? I realize
What about the feasibility?
I realize we're putting a pause, and the reason I led with, we can't debate a warrant article that's not in front of us, but I would ask the question of, based on a $43 million ask for the town, I would think that would at least, it would be plausible and defensible and all of those kinds of things to at least say, why don't we look at another option? Right? We've looked at modular at Freeman Kennedy. We've looked at this expansion at Freeman Kennedy, but we haven't looked at let's build a pre-K early learning dedicated some other part of town and see how that might compare to a $43 million project.
That wasn't looked at as part of this. It was looked at in a previous.
I know, that's what I'm
Can
saying.
But I
2006 is an inaccurate number.
Yeah.
That was this issue was not an issue in 2006.
I think
This space study, I think, is what you're referencing when we said that's when we started evaluating a possible third site. That was done in 2017.
And I think what might have confused us is when we did the study in 2016, we were looking at options. We knew that when Freeman Kennedy was built, the requirement for the architectural firm to submit a school plan as a model school was it had to have opportunities for expansion, or that wasn't necessarily planned for Norfolk. That just made it eligible to be part of a model school. So we knew at that time that there were possibilities to meet the demand we were looking at in 2017 to expand Freeman Kennedy. We knew it had been considered in design to make the plan a model school. It wasn't considered for Norfolk. It was just part of the model school project MSBA. So we knew that building could grow. And that's when we looked at that possibility. I think, to correct a couple of things, the reason that we looked at that now, we can't fit, if the enrollment projections are accurate and we see another 100 students, we don't have classroom space for them in the existing Freeman. We cannot squeeze them in. Our class sizes at Freeman are on the higher end of the region. We can't have them grow. There's no way that we could accommodate that kind of growth. So we knew we had a demand here and we had a demand at the HLA. And then looking at this, because we knew there were designs available, that it made sense to have Flansburgh come in and say, given the needs at both buildings, could the potential expansion plans that you had in place meet this need? That's what they did in 2017. So I apologize if I confused it by talking about the model program, but that model program in 2006 was not considered for Norfolk. It was just part of the design project that MSBA was funding. And they did that because design costs are expensive for schools and for any town. So they asked people that were being funded by the MSBA to have design options so that districts and towns that wanted to adopt a current school could take those architectural plans and run with them and not pay those additional design costs. Does that clarify that at all?
I think while you consider your question, it's also germane to mention that the problem isn't necessarily sourced at pre-K. Pre-K is the easiest educational unit to move because they don't access other portions of the building. So it is the most pick it up, put it someplace else component that we have, and moving the special education offices frees up space at HOD as well. HOD is where the space concerns are the most critical presently. It is where we have zero space. Freeman is where we are using 97% of our space. So the Freeman is not exempt from the issue with space allocation. It is just not the most critical situation that we have.
I agree with everything you've said, which would make me say we should look at a third site for the pre-K, because when they leave pre-K, we're going to have space constraint at HOD, and you can shift those to FK, and at FK we'll have the spot. But like putting the place where we have the most flexibility, which is the waitlist size of pre-K, into the constrained space of the expansion footprint of FK seems strange when it's the easiest thing to put the pre-K at a site isolated because they don't go anywhere else.
It just wouldn't allow us to address the space needs, the anticipated growth that we're going to have to accommodate at Freeman Kennedy.
I get very confused because every time we talk about what's driving the need for expansion, it changes, whether it's the pre-K enrollment, the pre-K wait list, the size of the special education demand within the pre-K group. But the thing about pre-K kids, they become first and second graders, right, and then become fifth and sixth graders.
Right.
There is an inconsistent story of what's driving the need for expansion. Just say that.
And I would say that I don't think there is. I think that they identified a short-term need,
But David,
which is, hold on, let me finish my sentence.
Yeah.
Because I let you finish yours. They've identified a short-term problem with pre-K. The solution is to, in the short term, deal with it through. They've also indicated that there will be a long-term growth issue with the schools. So there are two issues.
Couple points there. The most accurate projection is 5 years out. The study was done in 2018, and they over projected what would happen 5 years later in 2023 by 100 students. So
I'm not disagreeing with what you just said. I'm simply saying they made the case based on the numbers that they had.
and the reason there's a long-term growth issue, their own projections say the numbers go down, and they said that's because it's most accurate at 5 years. So I don't know why we believe there's a long-term growth issue
That's a different
when
question.
the demographic study doesn't go out that far, and they were at most inaccurate at the point they're supposed to be most accurate.
The question you asked was, I haven't heard you do this. It's because you disagree with the projections, essentially. And I don't say they're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong or right, but you can't say that they didn't make the case. What you're saying is that the projections on the demographic projections are problematic. So there we go. So that's the question. And I would tend to agree with him on that, but I'm trying to give you a sense that I think that's their case that they're making. If we disagree with it, that's the issue.
And I can say, again, what we've shared earlier is the demographic projections that were done back in 2018 for the first several years were tracking very closely to what we were seeing. We can't account for the impact of the pandemic on the recent projections. We know that it's recovering. We know that it's trending upwards. We know there's a lot of development still happening that hasn't come on the market yet. So we do anticipate we will redo those projections, probably use a different firm to confirm that. What we're asking for is the design portion of the project. We can incorporate the design portion. Doesn't mean that this can't change in scope or that we can't change it in nature as we're going through the process. And we do intend as part of that to get new projections following COVID to look at what the market conditions are doing. What we're saying is we're out of space at HL Day. The pre-K isn't the primary problem. And what I was responding to Rob about was the crowding that we are anticipating at Freeman Kennedy. We do not have flexible spaces to accommodate that growth. What's driving, he asked me specifically why it's different to have the same number of students at HOT now that we may have had years ago. That is because of changes in programs that have happened over time. When you need double the number of classrooms for kindergarten, that just takes space. So it's the process that we started in 2017 is because of the building and development in town. It is because of the anticipated growth coming. And again, we were looking for a single construction project that would hopefully meet all of that need and be the most cost effective.
Susan?
I would like to be very respectful of the fact that some of the topics that we've discussed tonight are not actually what is on the warrant. So apologies for that. We are actually, the point is to discuss the warrant article. But my question is for Justin. Is there an option, whether it's on this warrant or on the spring warrant, to put a feasibility study in, or not an expansion of Freeman? Because that's what this one was, meaning they really didn't expand on other options, which is fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but seeing as the projection numbers have come in and some other things, would it be possible to do that so that when these questions arise, we can actually answer them fully to the town? Is that an option?
Yeah, I think really an option.
We're gonna ask the town to give $4 million to design this. If you give $4 million, it pretty much means you're gonna give the 43 million, because nobody's just gonna flush $4 million down the toilet. 150,000 for a feasibility study could be a wash. You could say, oops, we made a mistake, we're not moving forward at this time. Sorry, we lost 150 grand of the town's money. You're not gonna lose 4 million. So if we move forward with this, and we ask the town to move forward with this, we're telling them there's no other option on the table. This is it. And I think that that's I think that that's a slippery slope, and I think that's gonna lead to it being voted down. And no one wants to see it voted down. We know there's a problem with our schools. We know it needs to be solved. Before we take this to the town and get it voted down, which I don't think anyone really truly wants to see, we just want to see that we're spending the town's money appropriately and we've looked at all the options. Is that an option? Because I do want to be mindful that this is what is on the warrant right now. The other stuff is not really on the warrant, so talking about it almost means nothing.
It's a tricky response for me because, you know, the school committee and so forth, they believe in moving forward with this article, and I believe they would want to focus on this article at this town meeting. I think you're kind of answering your own question a bit, because if it does get approval, you know, it is $4 million into a project. So you're probably going to question whether you want to move backwards from that. You probably want to move forward with that. And that's, I'm sure, what the school committee would want to do. I imagine too, though, that if it happened not to fail, or it happened not to pass, that they would want to probably and look at other alternatives. So I think that's where you're at. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think that's the logical order of operations.
What I was going to say is that, we or anyone else could propose a substitute article, and then you'd vote on that, and that would be the beginning or the end of this.
We're not going to really put that out. That really doesn't
I don't think they would want to do that, and I don't think they would.
I can say that I mean, I've been on the school committee. This is going to be the end of my 6th year coming up in the spring. This project planning predates my tenure with the school committee. I have sat on 3 different iterations of school committee membership in my time. This has received unanimous school committee support across the board. And not
those 6 years that are really, and I don't mean just looked into it, talked about it, and then set it aside. Have we ever really done a deep dive into an option, or because we built Freeman with the idea that we were expanding it, then therefore that was really the only thing on the table?
No, the school committee has looked at all of the alternatives. We had meetings that discussed whether or not we should move forward with this feasibility project. We had a building subcommittee that went through the process of vetting the architects that we utilize for the feasibility project. We have been engaged in ongoing meetings with AI3 to ascertain, what is appropriate, what is going to be cost effective. Justin's first feedback from me was that it needs to be smaller. When we began that process, personally, from my standpoint, I have an understanding of, how the school works. I have a basic, I have some personal feelings about a third site based upon a land acquisition and building project that was done in town in the past decade that perhaps was not the most cost-effective option that could have been done. But that's my personal opinion, and each member of the committee. And there are only 2 members of the committee who have remained consistent since I began with the committee. So there have been, 5 or 6 other people who have cycled through in that time, all from different backgrounds, all with, different sort of perspectives that they're bringing to this process. Some were on the building committee when Freeman was built originally. And some were on the school committee when Freeman was built originally. It's the most in my personal opinion, as the chair and someone who's spent almost 6 years working on this and, being concerned about it, it's the most cost-effective option. I also know that from an ongoing maintenance standpoint for the school department in general, having a third site increases annual costs. You have to have a third body of administration that is overseeing that site. You have to be concerned about security at a third site. You have to be concerned about traffic studies coming and going in and out of the third site. How are you going to situate that site effectively in town, relatively close to the center of town, so that it is an appropriate space for all members of the community to be accessing, if that's going to be what you're accessing for, whether it's pre-K or you're moving kindergarten or you're moving, certain grades from HOD or Freeman, or however you're going to be baking that cake. How is it going to be accessible to everybody and be in some sort of centralized location? These are all the things that have been taken into account. I'm not looking to spend a tremendous amount of money. These buildings are expensive. I'm also not looking to unnecessarily drive up the annual operating costs of the schools. because we come and have, lively spirited debate with the advisory committee in the spring when we're discussing our annual operating budget. And I'm not looking for a situation where we need to come with a higher ask than is absolutely necessary, and adding additional layers of administration and, building maintenance and facilities maintenance to a third site would do that on an ongoing basis in perpetuity if you're looking at that as a permanent solution. And from the standpoint, frankly, of someone who comes and talks to you about our operating budget every year, and the discussion we had last spring, $150,000 for a feasibility study. It's not a lot compared to $4 million, but it's a lot of money in the eyes of the school department. So as a taxpayer and someone who's here advocating annually to not cut the operating budget of the schools, I would like to see the town spend money on something that I think is going to be the best fit solution. I understand that the alternative of something that might seem like it could be a solution that has less of a financial impact, maybe, can be attractive in a situation like this. I don't think that long-term that's actually what is going on here. I don't think that it's a viable solution. I don't think that the third site is the option. I personally would not support it. But, pending the outcome of the warrant articles that we have currently, we're going to need to solve the problem somehow at some point.
And I would say, I just want to bring to the attention that there is a
I
second
really
warrant
don't think we're going to have a substantive. You're not going to convince someone.
I'm not trying to convince. I have a question about the cost of this and whether or not a cost of a similar study for modular would be at the same price point or different price point.
No, we'd have to bid that out. I don't know.
I don't know how much feasibility study would cost.
Not the feasibility. I mean, this, because if it's modular, is most of this taken care of because you're already doing the modular, so you don't have to do these kinds of activities.
You'd have to redo the traffic study, I would assume, because you'd have to put different roadways in, different parking. You'd have to, so I think you'd have to
That's on the 350 side, so that I'm okay with 350 if that's the answer.
I'll chime in there. With modulars, you still need a full design team to go through the process. There still needs to be plumbing. There still needs to be electrical, fire protection, technology, the actual building itself. There's still a significant lift from a design team perspective. So
it's at the same order of magnitude of 4 million.
No, that's
what
He's
I'm sorry, did you say something?
I'm not sure. Are you actually a feasibility or a design? What is that?
design.
This.
Design. So if
Is it $1 million less or $3 million less? I think that would be a better way of asking the question. Or is it $1 million? Is it 500?
The same price?
Yeah, is it the same price?
Yeah, I would have.
And I understand that you cannot give us a definitive answer, and we're not taking it to the bank. So.
Yeah, no, it's not cutting the 4 million down to 1 million by any means. It might be a slight reduction, but it's not even cutting it in half, to be perfectly honest. The work involved, even go through the modular component, is still significant, because it's not just the building, it's also all site related items, it's all the utility connections. So even though
you had me at it's about the same.
Yeah.
Never mind.
And then because we've had this come up in the past about election costs, adding another election in an election year, is that covered within?
We would have to pay for the election, and we would have to pay for it probably out of our building rental account. So we would have to fund the cost of that.
So the schools are paying for the election.
If we move forward with an election, yes, we would have to
Whoever
pay,
wants to do the special election.
has to pay for it.
Okay.
Question.
Oh, yeah, but
So on the 4 million, the overall size of the project, right? So I've worked in 3 different public buildings that were all new buildings over the last 20 years. They were all less than 6 years old. Every single one of them, we're out of space. My current building is 7 years old. It's the new police station. We're grossly out of space. When I worked in Natick, the high school, when it was built, the day they moved in, they had 2 empty lockers, the entire building. Is this enough? So we're not revisiting this in, I mean, I don't know, Freeman was built when, right? But that's what I'm saying. Here we are 10 years later, and well, we didn't build it big enough. So we're going to spend, and as a person without kids that is looking at this going, oh my God, my property taxes can go through the roof. The overall project, we're like $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 per square foot. It's going to be a huge number, even though the actual construction cost per square foot's less, but the overall project per square foot is through the roof. Do we need to revisit this in 10 more years? Is it, and we know things have changed, classrooms are smaller, office space, if you hire someone that is supposed to have an office, they don't have an office, they're going to quit and go to the next district over with a new big building because they have an office. I get that. I'm out of office space. I can't promote a second in command because I don't have a place to put them. So this seems big, it seems very expensive, but is it enough so it's done once and done right and none of us will ever have to hear of it again in terms of as taxpayers?
Well,
No one is going to.
Not ever, but
No, but I also think in 15, 20 years, we're going to look at the HOD is going to go away. So we're going to need a brand new school.
because I mean, we're 10 years in the rearview mirror from what I would describe as a new school. New,
Yeah, no, it is.
and here we are for,
HOD is 30 years old, or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking to build a new school someplace else because it can't be built on site. So,
But I
yeah,
just want
no,
to jump
so-
in on that because I think it's an excellent point and we had the discussion about it. Any project funded, and I'll do it quickly.
MSBI, I know, so.
How you build for future growth. So when this was funded, you were only allowed to build for capacity.
Which is so stupid.
Well, actually, MSBA wasn't even accepting grant applications for overcrowding until it was the first year they would accept that as a condition to request assistance that we began applying.
But we do believe that this plan would meet the growing enrollment projections. And if they come in higher than that, there's a slight bit of flexibility. We did not want to cut it down. We didn't want to add, I do not want to end up with a building with open space. That would be terrible for all of us. So we did keep it tight, but there is a little bit of flexibility. So we have the 2 additional classrooms for pre-K.
Right.
I do think it would meet the need for the next.
Okay, I get the back end of this is the staff part that we all, with public employees, they see something newer and nicer elsewhere. Well, I'm going to go work there. It's a better facility, the benefits the same, and everything's, I'm going to go there. So is this solving that issue too? I don't know.
Can I just mention, we have 2 warrant articles. for
2?
you guys.
You have
We do.
one more.
Second one.
Well, there's
to
a related
establish
one.
a facility committee.
No, yeah, but this one's easy. No. This one's easy. What?
The next one is very.
Hold on, please, hold on, because I would like to move this on. Article 6 would establish the school building committee.
Yes.
What?
So what I was going to say is that committee would be comprised of a broad membership that will oversee the spending of this 4 million. And again, as we do demographics, if there's opportunities to make reductions to the scope or bring that cost in, that would not just be under the authority of the school committee, it would be a town appointed building committee. So those 2 articles go together.
Justin, that means the select board appoints, or is there?
I think it's a good discussion with the school committee and how they would want to. But
Okay.
Norfolk is very unique in that there's no laid out process in who appoints committees. I'm trying to put a structure together. I mean, we would probably want to have the school committee select where meet.
No, yeah, but it's the ultimate responsibility under the general law that's referenced is the select board.
Probably, because that's the way everyone's gone.
Cool.
And the select board did formally appoint, for example, the fire station building.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and so it would follow a process, akin to that. I'm sure there would just be people tripping over themselves to come work on this project.
It's an opportunity to bring more voice to the table.
Does anyone else have any questions on that portion of it? Okay, thank you. I think we're all set. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Justin. Good night.
Justin, if you want to join us, and Rich, you've been very patient. What are you here for again?
I think it was just listening and enjoying it.
Well, I think that it's probably pretty important that Rich be part of the process for the full build, and I don't know, Rich, have they consulted with you at all on, or planning board at all on how they're going to go about with this after the design phase?
Oh, good evening. How are you? I was just, well, first I'll tell you why I'm here, and then I was listening in, but the reason I was here, I was just making sure you weren't, holding off on the meta comment because we went back and forth with emails to next week.
I think we're waiting until next Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think everyone's had a chance to digest what we got. We didn't get it until Monday or yesterday. We got some of it. We got some of it over the weekend, but we got more yesterday, and I want to make sure everyone's looked at it. And that'll be everyone's homework.
So in terms of so to answer the second question, in terms of the the school project that you were discussing earlier, my involvement was really just relative to the school projections, not in terms of, looking at locations and so forth, some of the points that were raised earlier tonight, which is merely providing the data for them in terms of the different projects that have been in town and just associated with school enrollment projections. That was it. There wasn't any planning function to my role.
Okay. Justin, you indicated that you'd be able to talk to us a bit about some of the.
Yeah, just a quick update for advisory, because I know you guys haven't seen the capital list just yet, but we just got our free cash approved this week, and we're at $2,908,256. Last year we were at $2,946,662. So we're just around where we've been for the last couple of years. So I met with Todd today. So now that we have a figure, we've got a few financings on the plate, but we're going to have a capital list done by Tuesday. So you guys will have that in place for you for next meeting, and we'll present that list to you as well as the budget transfers list at the next meeting for you. So I don't really have anything regarding those items, but next week we will have the information. The biggest thing for me, I think, was the last time I met with you all, there were some outstanding questions regarding the prudent investor rule. And I just wanted to understand, I may have missed it. I don't know if you guys can just send me those questions so I can get them for you, so I can just address this on next week. You sent it to, I may have missed, I had an ICMA conference. So if you did, thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll have those answers for you next week as well then.
That all, is everyone else up? Yes, Rob.
I just have a question about free cash. Since free cash is, more than it's cash, that's more than the town thought they would raise. So it's extra money out of the taxpayers' pocket. What's driving this extra windfall that the town's getting outside of a normal judicial legislative process?
So there's a couple of things there, right? So we'll say conservative budgeting a bit, right? Conservative budgeting with conservative revenue forecasting. Generally speaking, we have had higher, I think this is what you're looking for anyway, too. Higher revenue than what we projected on when we've done the budget. Obviously, this past fiscal year too, we sent to a directive to departments to be pretty lean this past year. So we had pretty significant savings from departmental budgets. When you do a budget, there's some things that are imperfect, right? At that period when we were doing the budget for fiscal year 23, utility costs, gasoline, we were projecting to be a little bit higher, and they were high for a period, and then they went down. So we realized savings there. So there's a variety of things. Obviously, we have capital needs, right? And so we utilize free cash in Norfolk to fund capital. So we try our best to, be pretty judicious about.
Is there an intention to take a portion of this and put it in the
we typically have done that, and I probably would say now that I have a figure.
I don't know. I mean,
now that I have a figure,
what your need is.
Now that I have a figure, I would say it would be my, one of my philosophy. I think I said this to you guys last year. We want to increase the percentage in stabilization fund because we do know we have so many projects we're going out for, and if we can keep our bond rating as high as possible, then there is some impact on taxpayers, right? If we can save them some money. So I would say more than likely we will allocate some money to stabilization fund in the budget transfers this year.
Follow up to Rob's question is it's not for next week, but for next spring.
Yeah.
When you present previous years, it would be cool to see the difference between what our Budget to actual. Budget to actual, what we projected we were going to raise versus what we actually raised. And if any, and I know the departments don't want to do this, but if the departments came in significantly lower, I'd like to know that too. And they don't want to do that for a very good reason, so. But they should be congratulated if they did do that properly, so.
I can do that.
Cool. And Rich, we're going to see you on Tuesday too, right? Because you guys aren't you having your public hearing tonight? Wasn't that?
Well, the public hearing was last evening, but yeah, I'll see you.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll see you next Tuesday to talk about that.
Yep, we're excited to come see you and talk about the zoning.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think, did someone else have a comment or was there just a weird echo? Oh, okay. Select person Calcutt, did you have anything you wanted to add or? I was watching TV. Survivor's on.
He's actually on a flight.
Yeah,
he's 40,000 feet, so it could just be a one.
Working.
He's sending a screenshot and watching you from 40,000 feet, and I was like, okay. So he probably.
You're bored.
He's probably either.
There wasn't a good movie on the flight.
Wi-Fi or.
There was no good movie on the flight.
Doing his best to be involved with the school.
So
this is a better than
before we move on, theoretically we could vote on the fields tonight if you vote on
tonight.
Well, I would rather wait on a few things.
Can you do me a favor? I apologize for not being here, but could you tell me what when you're planning to vote and assign warrant articles?
We are trying to do it in the meeting in which the articles are taken up. So in other words, and we've done 5 or 6 of them already.
Okay.
The ones that resolve themselves during our meeting, we are trying to get them off the list. And to let you know, there is some ongoing discussions relative to the dredging project in Mirror Lake, which are not, to my satisfaction, resolved. And I'll forward you the email I got from the Conservation Commission today. And then there's some interplay between that and the actual pond treatment for Mirror Lake. So there's all sorts of stuff going on there, but I think those are all kind of looped together. The comment gentleman is going to come to our meeting on Tuesday. Unfortunately, I think we've gotten some information from Metacomment, but I think there's a need to hear from them more. We're going to hear from the planning board on Tuesday to resolve those. And then if people would like to vote on the Freeman tonight, we can do that, or we can wait until Tuesday.
We'll defer to anyone else, but if you're assigning warrant articles, that is the one I would like to present.
Okay.
If anyone's allowed to say that they'd like to present one, if not, you're welcome to assign whatever you want. I just was in this meeting, so obviously I am.
Sure. No, absolutely. Do you think
I'm saying I'm not going to be at any other meetings? I'm just saying.
we only have one more? So
You know,
I wasn't going to let you. Yeah.
Boilerplate, this is all I'm saying.
No.
But I'm happy to take this on if no one else wants it, and if anyone else wants it, please, you've been at more meetings than I have this fall, and I apologize. My the arrangement is different this year than it has been in the past, so
all right.
Apologies, but so that's all. That's completely up to you.
I have one question before we get there. I took a note before that said DPW may have water debt related for the Article 3 on the capital expenditure.
So we'll have all our capital for Tuesday.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Do we have minutes? I didn't see an email.
There are.
So we can either move to recess or we can move to vote on a few things. How's people
It's
feel?
the chair's prerogative, I believe.
Well, it's not. I like to take a sense of the members.
If anyone else is on there, as long as no one's opposed to that. You know, yes, we have other members, but I don't know how.
I'm going to be absent the next Tuesday.
So do you want to discuss the Freeman Kennedy?
Yes,
articles
I won't
now?
have another opportunity to.
Well, then let's discuss them now. Is there further discussions to occur, or should we just move to a discussion of where we're going to end up if we do take a vote?
Do that.
I'll entertain a motion to, on the article then.
I'd like to say something,
Okay.
if that's okay. And this is a very difficult thing for me to say, because for those who don't already know this, I have been a huge supporter of the schools for the last 10 years, and for the last 6 years that I've been on the advisory board, I've been the one who's, cheering them on, fighting for their budget. You remember what happened during COVID? I was the one who was screaming from the rooftops, give them the $120,000 from free cash. Like anything to not have to let teachers go. I could not support the schools more. I actually started a page that has over 1,000 people in town who are on it just in support of the schools. But you can't get on board with giving them $4 million in the design phase right now. I think there's way too many out for me. And for what I deem as my role on the advisory board, which is not what's best for Susan, it's what's best for the town of Norfolk. And 7 months after we just approved $22 million and we're still building that, I just don't see where the town is going to be on board with this, nor do we have all of the questions answered? We don't have all of the boxes checked. This is not anything against Ingrid or the school committee. I think they're both fabulous. I've been behind Ingrid every step of the way, and I think she does a fantastic job as a superintendent, keeping our budget in check, making the best decisions, making the hard decisions. I think there's too many open questions. For me, personally, to say, I'm okay with giving them, because in my opinion, if you give them the $4 million, then you're going to give them the $43 million.
You're going to try to give them the
43. That's essentially what we're saying, and I can't get behind giving $43 million when we have not explored if there is any other option. $43 million to do in addition when we just spent $22 million to build an entire station from the ground up. I work in construction. I don't see that. I know there's different things. So first of all, renovations are more expensive than new construction. I would agree with that. But for me, there's a lot of questions. So I hate to say it, but I will probably vote no, and I would probably be in favor of moving to IP it for now, because I don't really want to give the town the impression that I'm only speaking for myself, don't support something being done, because I do think our space issues need to be addressed. I just think that there's some boxes that need to be checked and some information that needs to be given before we ask the town to spend $4 million and then $43 million. So
the $4 million is I forgot to ask this, but the $4 million is on top of the 4. It doesn't reduce any of the future costs. Right? Okay, that's I was going through the list.
That's 47 million.
yeah, that's why I said 50 million.
That's
Like, no, it's not 50 million. Once you get past 45 million, you might as well.
1,300 per square foot.
Yeah.
Prior to entertaining a motion, does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Ken?
Listen, I'm new. I don't have kids. I think it would be nice to have the right facilities for them, but I'm kind of in the same boat where now that I'm hearing H. Olive Day, that's on the short list. That needs to, my mind as a taxpayer goes that, why don't we just do it right rather than we're going to expand this, but don't worry, in 10 years, we're going for that.
So I would argue that you have to keep the fact that the H. Olive Day will be 45 years old in 10 years is a separate topic on whether or not we do an addition, because it really is, because it's in 10 years, it's a completely different landscape. We may have a lot more kids. We may have a lot fewer kids. We may build a little red schoolhouse.
I'm just giving my perspective as a
I understand.
Taxpayer is that hearing that
I brought the span of the HOD up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
It's on the horizon.
It's the HOD.
Yeah.
But it is on the horizon.
It's on the horizon. So is there a solution that does everything for $50 million instead of 50 million efforts?
Could we potentially get away with some sort of modular setup system for the next 5 years and then start the process to just tear down HOD and rebuild a whole new building, which will address all of our space concerns in one swoop, instead of doing the addition on Freeman now and then addressing in 10 years HOD.
I don't know.
I just think that we have a lot of questions that need to be answered. That's me. But I think I yield the floor to anyone else who has.
I don't know if anyone remembers, but there was a brief discussion of turning the HOD into the new police station about 15 years ago before this.
Yeah. The good thing we didn't take HOD and put it in Freeman back then when we built Freeman, because we would definitely have space. So.
Joyce?
Thanks. So I took today off only because I felt like I needed a mental day. So what I did is, should probably take tomorrow off because I read through a good portion of the presentation. I think it was like 264 pages. So I did a decent skim through it. You guys did most of the talking, but I had already made up my mind. But my points are that I don't have much faith in the projected growth that was handed to us. My second point is one of the things Justin Thibault, whatever his name, from AI3. He said that what we needed to do for our children and for our town is to create a better learning environment, which is what his state-of-the-art design and what the school committee is looking at. Personally, and this is personally, I don't believe a building is going to teach our children any better. Jonathan, you had a great comment. You said the nature of teaching has changed. It absolutely has. I've seen it the last couple of generations. My kids went here, my grandchildren go here. I've noticed certain things in the way the schools are managing the kids, managing the work, managing the curriculum, how they're teaching, what they're doing within the schools. So my feeling is that neither one of our schools is in decrepit condition. I don't believe that the projections are as dire as suggested this evening. Let me see. The chair of the school committee doesn't enjoy coming back to us and asking for increase in operating expenses. It is not an enjoyable time for anybody, believe me. But by creating a brand new school, even though it might be 4, 5, 6 years down the road, we're going to have all those higher costs coming towards us anyway. What I wish we could do is have a look at the schools, accommodate the students that are coming in, and could we take a look at adding additional monies for teachers, for aides, for the curriculums to be able to teach our children the way we're seeing the progression of teaching going. So it takes I'm taking it out of the context of the warrant article. I get that, but I really don't think we have the answers. And I really don't think right now we have the need to move forward. I would be voting no or IPing it. And that's just my opinion.
Does anyone else want to add in? The question becomes, I'm going to hear it from somebody, is we either do an IP, which is a acknowledgement that we still have questions in a certain sense, and that we believe that there's more work that can be done, or we vote no, which means we make a fairly affirmative statement that we don't think that this school expansion would be a better way of saying it is right at this time. And I think what I've heard is that everyone thinks we need to have further work done.
In your opinion, Mr. Chair, which do you?
Good one.
Which do you think is?
I think an IP
Since I.
properly explained, an IP is a better way to go, but that's my own personal opinion.
I think that sometimes they don't get properly explained, people don't.
Well, that's your job.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, or whoever.
Thanks for me.
But I also think that voting no, we lose an opportunity to acknowledge that we perceive that there could be an issue that needs to be addressed by a third space, by modular classrooms, by an addition. If we IP it, we're saying, look, we didn't hear what we needed to hear, that this is the solution. Is there another solution?
Are they gonna come back though and say, well,
They're gonna have
you approved the feasibility study last spring,
So they did the feasibility study and we don't have the answers that we wanted.
Yeah.
The feasibility study didn't give us what we needed. And I think that's the sense that I'm getting from basically everyone here.
An IP personally.
I'd be okay with it as well. I mean, I probably would vote no, but if we move to IDEA, that's works just
I mean,
well.
as our moderator has said, an IP is a no, but it's a different way of saying no.
Correct.
And I think
It doesn't look like an order for saying no.
it looks like we don't think
It says we don't support this as written.
Then what's the vote on town meeting for?
it's that
The
that they have, so the
motion
motion is, Jay would say all in favor of the motion, which is to knock it down.
Yeah.
You sure about this?
Yes.
We
You're
went through this a couple years ago.
You're voting.
I think it's either, because at town meeting, it's Mr. Moderator, I move.
No, actually, I think Rob might be right. I think in this case, Jay would ask the school committee to make the motion, and then we would stand up and say, we believe you should vote no. It happened last spring.
The way the town works.
Yeah, exactly.
They got up.
Yeah. Because we said no.
And then it passed, and we were all like, well, that was 3 weeks of our arguing down the drain. Nothing happened.
But I mean, it's so, go ahead, Justin.
It really is dependent on Jay, actually, because technically advisory has the right to make the motion. So Rob was correct. He was like, Mr. Maher, make the motion to indefinitely postpone. But at times Jay has allowed, if it's a conflict, if someone wants to continue, he allows them to go make the motion
We
first.
have to go into it. If I'm.
So that's more a Jay call.
If Jay said that, I would probably put my foot down and say, no, Jay, this is one that is really important to us and we're going to make the most.
I got it right.
I think
Right to do it, it's still, and no, I mean, he can still do what he wants, this is a moderator, but I would.
His meeting, baby.
And then it would come down to, he has to choose between his advisory board and.
Stand up.
Yep.
And.
I've been sitting too long. I
saw
have to
that.
stand up. Sorry.
John, what do you want to do?
I would, at risk of being brief, so I'm not repetitive, I would also support IPing this. I know nothing about construction. I know nothing about construction costs. I know nothing about what's reasonable and unreasonable. I'm the perfect layman in this. To me, a $50 million addition for a school which was pre-designed to a certain extent to accommodate an addition, to then hear all of the minutia that's involved in the associated cost, and there's hand waving when we ask about modular, and like something doesn't smell right here, right? To me, and I'm sorry if this is casting aspersions or throwing shade at anyone, but it seems that we've jumped on the do it to the gold standard expensive degree, and that's what we're getting fed. We're getting fed recommendations, and we're getting fed plans, and we're getting fed feasibility study answers that give us the gold standard of redefining education for our youth, and like all of this stuff. I think what we're hearing, and I'm again not to try and cast aspersions, we've got a 250-page document selling us on why this is critically important, or else our kids are all going to just be dumb. I don't think it solves the problem. And as everyone said, there's a lot of back and forth on what the problem is. Is the problem FK? Is it space? Is it the pre-kindergarten? Is it we've heard conflicting answers, and then it kind of comes back to, well, it's all of those things, but it's really unclear, and it seems for a $50 million project, I'm not happy with the lack of clarity on a lot of that stuff. And are there other options we've looked at that can come in at $20 million or $30 million? What are those, as opposed to just hearing out, we looked at it, it's not going to work. So I would also support IP.
I will accept a motion on Article 5.
I want to throw my 2 cents in too, and I'll keep it super short. So there are 3 questions that when people ask me for money, I want to know. 1 is, why do you need it? 2 is, why this thing? And the 3 is, how much is it going to cost? I think they got 3 figured out. And I'm not even going to argue the gold plating, because that's just part of the process. And the committee, like the Firehouse Committee, did a great job of narrowing that down and keeping it in scope. So the gold plating will come off in the process. I'm actually not even worried about the gold plating issue. But the why is not sufficiently answered. And I have big questions about the why this approach over others. From the very first time we talked about moving the pre-K into the 5th, 6th grade wing, it's not like an obvious solution. And there's never been a deeper reasoning put behind why that makes more sense, other than we had this plan laying around, so that's our plan. So because there's not a clear answer on why, the demographic study, I don't believe, and they say, well, it was wrong because of the way the world worked, and it's going to be right in the future. That's a not great argument. And then 2, I don't know why this solution. So I just can't get there.
I don't want to. I was gonna make a motion, but I don't want to make a motion if anyone still wants to speak.
No, I mean,
Okay.
No,
I moved, it's been a long time since I've done this, so sorry. I moved to indefinitely postpone Article 5.
Get a second.
Second.
The article that we're discussing.
All in favor of definitely postponing Article 5 or 5?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Nope. No opposes.
I
do think we do have to vote on Article 6, and I think it's the same motion.
well, yeah, because it's doing the committee, and my answer.
Without a budget, we don't need a committee, and if they don't have a budget, they don't need to exist. So.
Okay, so then I move to indefinitely postpone Article 6 as written in the one.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I don't like when we do something that the town does something different, because then I feel like we go a little bit failed if we do something and then the town goes in and it's like, no, we're not listening to you, we're doing it. But with that said, I think it's very telling that we have both conservatives and liberals on this board, and we have people who are parents and not parents, and work in construction, don't work in construction, work in business, been on boards for 20 years, and we all agree that this is wrong, right, as it stands. I think that's pretty telling that they would have had a lot of trouble at town meeting.
We're not done yet. I'm standing up because my leg is. We have no minutes. We could have voted on it. We'll wait on the field ones. Unless Jeff have something?
Just a quick question, now that I'm thinking through it. Are there certain departments that you like to hear from for capital? Capital is usually the same. So, who are some certain departments that you want?
It depends on what they're buying. Yeah. If it's something complicated, like when they bought radios, the police department bought radios. Cruisers are.
I can speak those fluently, so yeah, I can translate anything that's on that paper.
But if the DPW is buying trucks, but if the DPW is replacing like a boiler or a hose or a steam system or a giant lawnmower, we're not overly concerned. It's more anything big or anything complicated. Okay. Like we spent $30,000 on radios, but it was a lease to own kind of option, so it was a.
I have enough guidance, and if I
can speak on that. That's a bad.
Yeah.
Back and we did it for the DPW truck, because it was like fix or buy, fix or buy, and we went back and forth on those, but I, like, we did.
And so Justin, I think
We did it for the one mower that the rec department bought, but we didn't need to.
the guidance I would have is I would love to know what is happening the next year. So because it goes to your capital plan, right? Like getting surprised that we need a big truck this year. It would have been nice if we had known a year before, like, hey, we're extending it, but imagine it'll be there next year.
So I'm thinking then to make this work, because I want to, when we develop the capital list, then I'll know what's going to be on there and what might make sense. But also, are you going to meet the week after that?
We have to have our article written by, hold on, Eric.
Yeah, you have to have it written by then, but I'm just.
Have our motions, our recommendations written by. Okay.
I need it by the weekend after, so that.
So we need to start writing, so now we're not meeting again.
Okay.
Well. So I need, so she needs a Monday, or before that.
Please.
I got
Sorry, thank you.
I'm just thinking like logistics to make sure that I get the right people in front of you on Tuesday, because I have a select board meeting Tuesday as well. So I'm gonna have Todd come in, and if I can swap around, I can, because I have the assistant town administrator there. But in case a department isn't available that you might want to hear from, you could still hear from them at a future meeting.
I think, if you wouldn't mind sharing the list with me, I'll tell you who we're going.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
The cruiser should be green. So we're setting off east, and Todd should explain why he can't bump up the excise dollars by like 15 or 20 grand, and why he got so snarky about it last time I mentioned it, and dragging in $2 million in free cash.
I'll make sure.
You know what we're talking, I think it makes sense. I mean, like,
No, I was just figuring out scheduling.
the classic was the roof replacement at the HOD.
Yeah.
Because it was a fairly complicated project and it was very controversial at town meeting, and they ended up bringing it under budget after they tried to shoot it down completely. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
You gotta make.
Oh, I thought you made a motion to adjourn. Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, I'll see you guys. Yeah.